I found it in the back of a drawer. Old bureau, half empty, the kind of place you stop checking carefully after the first few passes. It was folded once. Handwritten, my grandmother's writing, dated 31 years ago. I almost put it aside. Then I saw my father's name. So I opened it. Read the first few lines, just trying to place what it was. Then I hit one paragraph. I stopped, went back, read it again, slower this time, because something in it didn't just explain what I was reading. It explained something I'd been living with for 30 years. I sat down on the edge of the bed, letter still in my hand. Read that same paragraph a third time. That should have felt like a discovery. It didn't. It felt like something being confirmed that I never had the pieces to question. Because for as long as I can remember, my cousin Marcus never looked at me like we were on the same side. Not once. And I'd spent years trying to figure out why. Turns out, I was never supposed to. Marcus and I grew up in the same rooms. Same holidays. Same tables. Same long afternoons at our grandparents' house where nothing was really happening, but everyone stayed anyway. We were close in age. 7, maybe 8 months apart. Old enough to notice each other. Not old enough to understand anything clearly. From the outside, it looked like we should have been close. Same environment. Same people. But it never worked like that. I don't remember a specific moment where it started. No fight. No argument. Just a pattern that was already there by the time I noticed it. Marcus didn't like me. Not openly. Not in a way anyone would step in and correct. Just consistently. If we were playing something, he'd find a way to shift it slightly. Not enough to make it obvious. Just enough that I was always a step behind. If we were on the same team, he'd take over. If we weren't, he'd push harder than necessary. Not aggressive. Just pointed. I remember one afternoon at my grandparents' place. We were outside, kicking a ball around. Nothing serious. At one point, I passed it to him. Clean pass. He stopped it, looked at me, and said, "That was slow." I shrugged. Okay. He kicked it back harder than needed. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to make a point. I trapped it, sent it back. We kept going. That was the pattern. Small things. Never enough to call out. Always enough to feel. At family dinners, he'd sit across from me. Not next to me. Never next to me. If I said something, he'd respond, but just slightly off. Like he was correcting something that didn't need correcting. Or adding something that made mine sound smaller. "School's been busy," I'd say. "Yeah, but it's not that hard," he'd reply. Not loud. Not rude. Just enough. No one ever stepped in. Because there was nothing obvious to step into. From the outside, it looked normal. 2 kids. Same age. Slight tension. Nothing unusual. As we got older, it didn't go away. It just refined itself. Less direct. More controlled. In high school, we barely spoke unless we had to. Family events. That was it. Even then, it stayed the same. Polite. Distant. Slight edge underneath. I tried at one point to change it. Not dramatically. Just open it up. I remember pulling him aside once after a family thing. We were both around 16. Did I do something? I asked. He looked at me for a second. No. That was it. No explanation. No follow-up. Just no. I nodded. All right. And that was the end of that attempt. After that, I stopped asking. Not out of frustration. Just practicality. If someone doesn't want to explain something, pushing doesn't help. So I adjusted. We settled into something that worked. Not close. Not hostile. Just separate. At gatherings, we'd acknowledge each other. Short conversations. Surface level. How's work? Good. You? Same. It stayed like that for years. Through college. Through early jobs. Through everything that changes most relationships. Ours didn't change. It stayed exactly where it had always been. That should have bothered me more. It didn't. Because over time, it stopped feeling like something to solve. It just felt like something that existed. Still, every once in a while, something would cut through. A look, a tone, something slightly sharper than usual. And I'd feel it again. That question I'd already let go of. Why? Not in a dramatic way. Just curiosity that never fully disappeared. The last time I saw him before all of this, we were in my grandmother's house. Same place we'd always been. Same setup. He walked in, nodded at me. Hey, hey. We stood there for a second, then both moved in different directions. No friction, no connection, just default. That should have felt normal. It did, but there was always something underneath it. Not loud, not pressing, just there, like a conversation that started years ago and never actually happened. And I'd accepted that it probably never would, until I found something that made it clear. It had already happened, just not with me in it. I sat there with the letter still in my hand. Didn't read the whole thing again. Just that one paragraph. Over and over. It wasn't long. A few lines. My grandmother writing to my grandfather. No emotion in it. No drama. Just explaining a decision they had already made. A financial gift. Significant. Given to my parents before I was born. For a specific reason. Clear. Practical. Thought through. That part didn't shock me. Families do things like that. Help one side. Support when needed. It happens. What mattered was the next part. The instruction. Keep this private. Especially from Marcus's parents. I read that line again. Slower. Then the line after it. Explaining why. Not out of secrecy for its own sake. But because it would create tension. Comparison. Unnecessary resentment. They were trying to avoid something. That part was clear. And then, they didn't. Somewhere along the way, it got out. Not through them. Through someone else. I could see it in the wording. My grandmother even mentioned it. Briefly. Your sister may have said something already. That was it. No follow-up. No correction. Just acknowledgement that the line had already been crossed. I leaned back slightly, still holding the paper. Let it sit. Because now it wasn't just a decision. It was a story. And stories don't stay where they start. They move. They change shape. They get passed on. Marcus was 7. That part came back to me without needing to be written. Because I knew his father. Not a loud man. Not aggressive. But precise. Held on to things. Carried them forward. If he heard about that, he wouldn't let it go. I could almost hear the version of it. Not word for word. But close enough. They got something we didn't. Your grandparents chose them. Remember that. Not said once. Said over time. Reinforced. Repeated just enough that it settled into place. I set the letter down on the bed next to me. Looked at nothing for a second. Because that was it. That was the missing piece. Marcus didn't grow into that resentment. He was handed it. Early. Before anything between us had even formed. And once something like that is set, it doesn't question itself. I thought back to everything. The small moments. The comments. The distance. None of it was random. None of it was about anything I did. It was alignment. Him acting from something he believed was already true. I stood up, walked over to the dresser, then back again. Didn't know what to do with the movement. Just needed something to break the stillness. 30 years. Reduced to that. That should have made me angry. It didn't. Because anger would have meant I thought he chose it. And now it was clear. He didn't. He inherited it. That was the shift. I picked the letter back up, read the paragraph again. Not for information this time. Just to confirm it still said what I thought it said. It did. And suddenly, Marcus made sense. That line. The way he always held something back. The way every interaction felt slightly off balance. It wasn't personal in the way I thought. It was structured. Built over time. I sat back down, rested my forearms on my knees, letter still in my hand. There was no confrontation in this. No moment where it broke. It just explained itself. That should have felt like relief. It didn't. It felt like something else. Because if this was true, then everything between us had been shaped by something neither of us ever actually talked about. And that meant one thing. For 30 years, we weren't distant by accident. We were following a version of the story we never chose. And never checked. I didn't call him. Not right away. I folded the letter back along the same crease and set it on the dresser. Then picked it up again. Opened it. Read the paragraph one more time. Not because I needed to understand it. Because I needed to see if it felt the same. It did. I left my grandmother's house later that afternoon with it in my bag. Didn't mention it to anyone else. Didn't need to. This wasn't something that needed a group conversation. That night, I sat at my kitchen table longer than usual. No TV on, no music, just quiet. I thought about Marcus. Not as he is now, as a kid. 7 years old. That part kept coming back. Because at 7, you don't question the story you're given. You absorb it. You build around it. If someone tells you something is unfair, you don't analyze it. You carry it. And if it's repeated, it becomes fact. I leaned back slightly in the chair, stared at the ceiling for a second, then back down at the table. 30 years of that. Not constant, but consistent. I started lining things up, not emotionally, just structurally. Every interaction, every small moment that felt slightly off. The comments, the distance, the way he never fully stepped in. It all fit, too cleanly. That should have been satisfying. It wasn't, because understanding something doesn't undo it. I got up, walked to the sink, filled a glass of water, took a sip, then set it down. Didn't finish it. The question shifted. Not why. I had that now. What now? That was different. Because nothing about the past was changing. That part was fixed. But the present, that was still open. I sat back down, rested my hands on the table. Same position I'd been in earlier. Different weight behind it. I tried to picture leaving it alone. Just putting the letter away. Letting things stay where they were. We already had a system. It worked. Not close. Not hostile. Just defined. There was a version of this where nothing changed. Where I knew the reason. And chose not to touch it. That would have been easier. That should have been the decision. It wasn't. Because once you understand something like that, you can't interact with it the same way. Every future conversation would carry it. Every look, every tone. Not as a question anymore. As context. And context changes things, whether you act on it or not. I picked up my phone, unlocked it, scrolled through my contacts until I landed on his name. Stopped there. Didn't tap it. Just looked at it. Marcus. The same name I'd seen on my phone for years. Always tied to short conversations. Occasional messages. Nothing more. I locked the phone again, set it down. This wasn't a reaction. That mattered. I wasn't trying to fix something quickly or confront him out of frustration. If anything, it was the opposite. I understood him more clearly than I ever had. That should have made it easier to let it go. It didn't, because now I knew something he might not. And that changed the balance. Not in a dramatic way, just slightly. I stood up again, walked to the window, looked out. Nothing specific, just needed a different angle. For 30 years, I thought he was choosing distance. Now it looked different. He was maintaining something he thought was already justified. That's not the same thing. I went back to the table, sat down, picked up my phone again. Unlocked it. This time, I didn't scroll. Just opened a message. Started typing. Stopped halfway through. Deleted it. Tried again. Simpler. Hey, can we meet sometime? I found something you should probably see. I read it once. Didn't adjust anything. Didn't add context. That was enough. I hovered over the send button for a second. Not because I was unsure. Just marking the moment. This was the first real step. Not toward fixing anything. Just toward changing the direction. That should have felt bigger. It didn't. It felt necessary. I hit send. Set the phone down. A few minutes passed. Then it buzzed. His reply was short. Same as always. What is it? I looked at the screen for a second. Then typed back. Better to show you. 3 dots appeared. Paused. Then disappeared. Then came back again. Finally. Okay. When? That was it. No resistance. No curiosity beyond the surface. Just agreement. That should have meant something. It didn't. Because the real shift wasn't in him yet. It was in me. For the first time in 30 years. I wasn't guessing what sat between us. I knew. And now. So would he. We said it for a few days later. Neutral place. A cafe halfway between where we both lived. Somewhere we'd never been together before. That mattered. I didn't tell him anything else. Didn't explain what I found. Just left it as it was. In the days leading up to it, I didn't reread the letter. That part surprised me. I thought I would. Go back to it. Check it again. Make sure I wasn't misreading anything. I didn't. Because the meaning was already clear. And going over it again wouldn't change that. What I did think about. was how to handle the conversation, not what to say, what not to do. I wasn't going in to correct him or prove something. That would have turned it into a different kind of conversation. This wasn't about winning a point. It was about putting something on the table that had been sitting underneath everything for decades and letting him see it. I sat at my kitchen table the night before, phone in front of me, nothing on. Same position I'd been in a few nights earlier. I tried to imagine how he'd react. Angry, dismissive, defensive, all possible, or nothing. That last one felt more likely, because that's how he'd handled most things between us. Contained. I picked up a pen, rolled it once between my fingers, then set it down. The question shifted again. Not how will he react? What do I expect from this? That mattered more, because if I expected it to fix something, it wouldn't. 30 years doesn't adjust in one conversation. That should have been obvious. It wasn't at first, but sitting there it became clear. This wasn't about changing the relationship overnight. It was about removing something that had been shaping it without either of us actually touching it. That's different. I leaned back slightly in the chair, looked at the ceiling, then back down. Once he sees it, he cannot see it. That was the only real outcome. What he does with it, that's separate, and I wasn't responsible for that part. That was the decision, not to control the result, just to introduce the truth. The morning of the meeting, I got there early. Not by much, just enough to sit for a few minutes before he arrived. I chose a table near the back. Less noise, more space. I had a copy of the paragraph in my jacket, not the full letter, just that section, folded once. Clean, clear. I took it out, unfolded it, looked at it for a second, then folded it again. Didn't read it. Didn't need to. The door opened. I looked up. Marcus walked in. Same as always. Calm. Controlled. He spotted me, walked over, sat down across from me. Hey, he said. Hey. He looked at me for a second. Then at the table. So what is it? He asked. No build-up. I nodded once. Reached into my jacket, took out the paper, and placed it in front of him. Just read that, I said. He looked at it. Didn't touch it right away. Just scanned it with his eyes. Then he picked it up, unfolded it. I leaned back slightly. Gave him space. No explanation. No framing. Just the document. That should have felt tense. It didn't. It felt controlled. Because for once, neither of us was guessing. He started reading. Slow. Careful. I watched his face, not for a reaction, just to see when it landed. About halfway through the paragraph, something shifted. Subtle. Not surprise. Not shock. Recognition. He kept reading. Finished it, then went back to the top. Read it again. That should have been the moment everything broke open. It wasn't. It stayed quiet. He lowered the paper slightly. Didn't look at me yet. Just held it there. That was the shift. Not loud. Not dramatic. But for the first time, we were both looking at the same thing. And neither of us could pretend it wasn't there anymore. He set the paper down between us. Not carefully. Not roughly. Just flat. Neither of us spoke right away. He leaned back slightly, eyes still on the table. Then finally looked up at me. That's from him? He asked. Yeah. He nodded once. When was this written? 31 years ago. He glanced back at the paper, then at me again. My dad knew about this, he said. Not a question. I figured he did, I replied. He gave a short breath through his nose. Not quite a laugh. He told me something like this when I was a kid, he said. Not like this, but enough. That lined up. Exactly the way I thought it would. What did he tell you? I asked. Marcus leaned forward, rested his forearms on the table. That your parents got help, he said. That it wasn't equal. That it wasn't right. He paused. Not in detail. Just the idea. I nodded once. And that stuck. I asked. He looked at me for a second. I was 7, he said. That answered it. He picked up the paper again, glanced over the paragraph, then set it back down. He never showed me anything like this, he added. Did you ever ask? I said. He shook his head. No. Then after a second, it didn't occur to me there was anything to ask. That was the line. Simple. Clear. I leaned back slightly. So you just carried it, I said. He nodded. Yeah. No defense. No justification. just acknowledgement. That should have felt like a confrontation. It didn't. It felt like something leveling out. I tapped my fingers once against the edge of the table, then stopped. I didn't know any of this, I said. I figured, he replied. We both sat with that for a second. 30 years. And this was the first time we were actually talking about what sat between us. Not guessing, not reacting, just stating it. Marcus looked down again, then back up. This makes it look different, he said. It is different, I replied. He nodded slowly. Yeah. There was a pause. Longer this time. Because now the question wasn't what happened. That part was clear. It was what that meant now. He leaned back in his chair, arms resting loosely. I always thought you knew, he said. That I knew what? That it wasn't even, he said. That something had been decided before we were even around. I shook my head slightly. I didn't know anything about it. He looked at me for a second, like he was recalibrating something. That's different, he said. That should have mattered more. It didn't. Because the past wasn't changing. Just the way we were both seeing it. I picked up the paper, folded it once, then set it back down. They were trying to avoid this, I said. Marcus glanced at it. They didn't, he replied. No, that was the only part neither of us needed to argue. He leaned forward again. I've been carrying that for a long time, he said. I know, and I didn't question it, he added. I didn't question you either, I said. That landed, because it went both ways. He sat back again, quieter now. For a second, it looked like he might say something else. Then he didn't. We just sat there, not uncomfortable, not resolved, just accurate. That was the difference. No more guessing. No more slight shifts in tone that meant something neither of us named. Just two people finally looking at the same version of the story. Marcus glanced at the paper one more time. I should probably talk to him, he said. Yeah. He nodded once. Yeah. That was the closest thing to a decision. Not about us. About what came next for him. And for the first time in 30 years. That wasn't something happening around me. It was something he was choosing. We stood up a few minutes later. No rush. No closing line. He picked up the paper, looked at it briefly, then handed it back to me. You keep it, he said. I nodded once. All right. That should have felt like a resolution. It didn't. It felt like something else. Not an ending. Not a fix. Just the first honest moment we'd ever had. And for what it was, that was enough. We didn't leave that cafe like cousins who'd suddenly fixed 30 years. That wasn't the tone. He went one way. I went the other. No handshake. No dramatic pause in the parking lot. Just two people carrying the same conversation in different directions. But something had changed. Not in the visible way people expect. Nothing warm. Nothing easy. Just less distortion. For the first few days after, I didn't hear from him. I didn't expect to. That conversation had enough weight in it already. It didn't need a follow-up text pretending to smooth it out. So I let it sit. Went back to work. Answered emails. Did normal things. But the whole week felt slightly different, like some low-grade pressure I'd stopped noticing had finally lifted and my body hadn't caught up yet. A few times, I caught myself replaying parts of the conversation. Not the facts. His face when he read it the second time. That was the part that stayed with me. Not shock. Recognition. Like some part of him had been waiting years for the story to become visible. About 2 weeks later, he called. Not texted. Called. That alone told me something. I was at home when my phone lit up. I looked at his name for a second before answering. Hey. His voice came through flatter than usual. Hey. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just heavy. Then he said, I talked to my dad. I stood up and walked into the kitchen without needing a reason. Okay. Another pause. It didn't go well. I leaned against the counter, one hand resting near the sink. Yeah, I said. I figured it might not. He gave a short breath through his nose. Tired more than amused. He said the paragraph doesn't change what happened. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. That sounds about right. Then he said your parents still got something mine didn't, so I was missing the point. I let that sit for a second. And Marcus was quiet long enough that I thought maybe he'd pull back. Then he said, and I told him that wasn't the point anymore. That landed harder than I expected. Not because it solved anything. Because it meant he'd moved, even if only an inch. We stayed on the phone longer than we ever had before. Not a huge emotional conversation. Nothing like that. Just honest. He told me his father had been bringing it up for years in small ways. Never sitting him down for some formal speech. Just comments. Side remarks. The kind of thing a kid absorbs because it keeps showing up. You notice who gets helped, he said. Or, some people get a head start and call it luck. Lines like that. Never enough to sound obsessive. Always enough to sink in. I stood there listening, one hand tapping lightly against the counter, and for the first time, I could hear the mechanics of it. How something old becomes normal just by being repeated in a calm voice often enough. Marcus said, I think I stopped separating you from the story before I was old enough to know there was a difference. I didn't say anything right away, because what do you even do with a sentence like that? Finally, I just said, yeah, it wasn't much, but it was enough. We didn't turn into close family after that. That would have felt fake. Too fast. Too clean. Instead, things got more accurate. That's the best way I can put it. At the next family gathering, he came in, saw me, and actually stopped. Not long. Just enough. How have you been? He asked. Good, I said. You? All right. And for once, it wasn't loaded. No edge tucked under it. No slight correction waiting behind the words. Just a real exchange that ended where it ended. That should have felt small. It didn't. Because when something has been slightly wrong for decades, even a normal moment feels new. Over the next few months, that became the pattern. We talk a little longer than before. Not deep, not personal right away, just possible. At one birthday dinner, we ended up standing outside together for a few minutes because the house was too warm inside. He asked me about work and actually listened to the answer. I asked him about his daughter's school. He answered without that guarded tone he always used to keep in reserve for me. At one point, he glanced over and said, This is weird. I laughed a little. Yeah. He looked back toward the house. Not bad weird. That was probably the closest we got to naming it. And honestly, that was enough. I thought about my grandmother a lot during that stretch. Not in some grand symbolic way. Just practically. That letter sat in a folder in my desk for a while after that. I didn't keep taking it out. Didn't need to. It had done what it was going to do. But I did think about how one paragraph had held all that damage inside it. Not because the paragraph caused it, because it named the thing that had been moving quietly through the family for years. That distinction mattered to me. The letter didn't create the distance. It just explained the shape of it. And once the shape was visible, it got harder for either of us to keep pretending it was natural. A few months after our meeting, Marcus and I ended up clearing out the last of my grandmother's things together. Not planned. We just happened to be there at the same time, and instead of drifting to opposite ends of the house like we usually would have, we stayed in the same room. Went through old boxes, stacked dishes, decided what could be donated. At one point, he held up some ridiculous ceramic bird she kept on a shelf for no reason and said, You taking this? I looked at it and said, Absolutely not. He nodded. Good. I didn't want to fight you for it. Dry, simple, stupid. I laughed harder than the joke deserved. That was the moment I realized how much I'd been missing all those years. Not closeness exactly. Just ease. The kind of ease people think either exists or doesn't, when really sometimes it gets blocked by something neither person built. We're not best friends now. I don't think that's where this is going. 30 years leaves its mark. You don't erase that because one document surfaces and one conversation goes well. But we're not strangers anymore either. And that matters. More than I thought it would. Because for most of my life, Marcus felt like someone I was related to on paper and nowhere else. Somebody I understood only by the temperature drop in a room. Now, when I see him, I don't feel that first. I just see him. That's different. That's enough. What stayed with me most wasn't that he'd been cold all those years. It was that he'd inherited the reason before he was old enough to examine it. That changed how I carry the whole thing. Not softer, just clearer. Some resentments don't start in the people who act them out. They get passed down, dressed up as fairness, and settled in a place so early they feel like personality by the time anyone notices. That doesn't excuse everything, but it explains more than anger ever did. An explanation, when it's honest, can do something anger can't. It can give two people a place to start from that isn't already crooked. I still have the copy of that paragraph. Folded once. Filed away. Not because I need proof anymore, just because some things deserve to stay documented after they stop running your life. If stories like this feel closer than they should, where silence ends is there when you need it. And tell me this. Have you ever found out a relationship was built on a story that started long before either of you had a say?